2010 Toyota Tundra with the 5.7, the 3UR-FE engine. Issue is check engine lights on. Did a full system scan. 3 codes in the engine computer. Pull this up. We're using the Autel MS906 BT Bluetooth. And the codes we have are, they're all P2443. Pending current and history, which is a second air injection system switching valve stuck in closed position, bank 2. So we're going to do some troubleshooting on that. But we believe it's actually the switching valve that's bad. So on these, it's under the intake in the back here. So you got to pull the intake manifold off. Here on the V6s, it's on one of the valve covers. But what they look like is it looks like this. There's one for bank 1 and bank 2. Just a switching valve for secondary air injection. Stuck close. One of these is stuck in a closed position. Got a new manifold gasket and a new throttle body gasket. Before we put those parts in, we're going to do some checks on it. But secondary injection, what it does is it pumps air into the exhaust. There's, switching valves there. There's electric pumps on here. There's lines on here, and it pumps air into the exhaust for all emissions related stuff. So we're going to go ahead and do some checks and then go from there. All right, so I cleared the codes out. What we're going to do now, before we go and pull it apart, no codes there. What you can do is you can go under special function and go to secondary air injection check. So hypothetically, obviously we're going to fix this truck with this issue, but once we're done, we want to prove that it's fixed. You do this under special function, secondary air injection check. Use this function to identify the components or components that may cause a malfunction relating to air injection systems, or validate the repair of an air injection system, which we're going to do. I want to run this test, and I expect the code to come back up because we didn't fix nothing yet. So I just want to prove that. Notice the active test required to perform this function check cannot run if the test status is not ready. Okay. You can do automatic or manual mode. We're going to do automatic mode. Ignition on, vehicle stopped, engine not running, battery voltage more than 8 volts. We're good. DTC, which related to the throttle airflow and misfire not detected. We cleared them. Second air and system status of data list is off, which it is. Next. It's going to tell us to start it. Once it does this 5-second countdown. Start engine, then press next. I'm going to go and start it. No engine light on. Engine's running, hit next. Can take 1 to 2 minutes, hit next. Now it's going to do its test. And we expect it to fail, obviously, because we didn't fix nothing yet. But this will be a good way to determine when we're done that we are good. Now it's doing more of its test. Like I said, we'll run it when we're all done, make sure it's good. That'll prove this truck is fixed when we replace that valve. So we'll let it count down here. I'm just going to pause until this test is done. So test is done. It says the air injection check is complete. Press escape to view any diagnostic trouble codes. So we're going to go back to DTCs. There's probably going to be a pending code. And there is. P2443, secondary injection system switching valve stuck in closed position, bank 2. So we got a hard fault. That valve is stuck. All right, so like I said, one of these is stuck, but it comes as assembly. There's like a little pintle in here that gets stuck. Now they have a service bolt-in Toyota put out where water gets in there and corrodes it or makes it stuck, or could make it stuck. But so you got a service bolt-in from Toyota. He's got a 2440 series. This is a 2010 Tundra. It's between there, but basically it says some 2008 to 11 models, Quena and 2011 model Tundras vehicles may exhibit a mill-on condition, DTCs. He doesn't have any of these. He's got the 2443. This condition may be caused by water intrusion in the air injection pump assemblies. Use the following procedure to address this condition. Well, this service bolting goes into the actual air pumps. We don't have an air pump issue. That's actually pumping the air into the assembly through the secondary air injection switching valves into the exhaust and all that. These are the air pumps they're talking water gets in there. We're going to look at that when we're in there. We got to replace that guy there. The service bolting's not what we're looking at exactly, even though it's one of the codes, but there's other issues with that. So now we got the removal procedures to do that. Right here's your air injection valves. We can do some tests when we get the manifold off. You can see puffs of air coming out once we do our tests. Once we get the manifold off, we can get to this for bank 2. We might as well check bank 1. You know, electrical connector hook up, puffs of air out. We'll do those checks per the service manual. Here's the actual injection switching valve. I don't know if I told you that, but that is the switching valve. Switching valve bank 1, switching valve bank 2. Check for puffs of air when we turn the pumps on and all that for the switching valve. But this is the overall illustrated parts breakdown of this. Your switching valve, your lines, and all that stuff. But to get to this, of course, it's under the intake, so we got to pull that. The wiring diagrams here. Here's bank 1 switching valve. Here's bank 2 switching valve. We'll look at all that too since we're in there. Your engine control computer. Look into this connector, check all these pinouts, which I'm sure they're fine, but we'll address that when we get in there. So now we got to go ahead and follow the service data to remove the intake. All right, before we pull this apart, I wanted to show you some other stuff. So you can go to active test. You know, when we want to actuate the air pumps or the switching valves, when we're in there, we can do all that stuff. Activate switching valve for secondary air control, the air pumps. We can do all these active tests when we get in there. That's how we're going to get those puffs of air, which it's saying it's stuck closed, so we don't expect puff air in the 1, bank 2, but also under special function where we were at earlier, secondary air injection, we did automatic mode, which is nice because it does it for you, but the manual mode is nice for certain troubleshooting aspects. We're not going to do it. We know it's a fault already, but I'll show you here. So you go to manual mode. Same parameters. Wait 5 seconds. Sorry about the glare. I can see myself in this damn video. All right. So start the engine. Hit next. Tells you each active test can only be performed for 5 seconds. There's the 30-second timer between active tests. Do not operate any active test more than 4 times in a row. So it's going to give you a list of tests right here under manual mode. So like air pump, if you wanted this one, air pump 1 and 2 on, the air switching valves 1 and 2 open, or if you wanted like pump 1 on, pump 2 off, switching valve open for 1, switching valve 2 for close. You could do all that. We might have to do that when we do our troubleshooting to actually see our puffs of air coming out like this diagram shows here. Because there's a position sensor. I would imagine that there's a position sensor in this valve. That's why there's 5 wires. You know, 2 wires positive and negative for the solenoid opening and closing, and then 3 wires for probably a position sensor, and that's how it knows that it's open or closed or the position of it. And that's why it's throwing that diagnostic trouble code. So what we're going to do now is start ripping it apart so we can get some more testing done. So before we get started here, I know I keep saying we're going to start, but the switching valve, imagine this going to bank 2, one side of the engine, this going to the other side of the engine. So these little air tubes go to the exhaust. The other end of it goes down here. There's 2 air pumps. So air pumps in regular air, pumps it up. The air sits here. The switching valve is open. Let air go into the exhaust. Add air, fresh air to the exhaust. Better for emissions. Well, all this, like I said, sits down in this little cavity under the intake. But obviously, the computer knows that bank 2 is closed because of the feedback data from the position sensor inside of this guy. So this is where we got to get to. I'm going to go ahead and start ripping it apart. and then we'll do some testing under there and replace it. Alrighty, so we're pulling the manifold off, the upper intake plenum, throttle body off, all these vacuum lines off, pulling the manifold off. Pretty simple, just vacuum lines, weld them all the way, some brackets and so forth. Just keep track of everything where it goes. Alright, got the intake off, got all the bolts here off, all the vacuum lines. There's a wire harness clamps in the back you got to release on the clamp. There's one right here. I got all that off. And then we took out some of the foam pieces there, so you can get access to our air switching valves, which are back here. So if you look here, we're going to clean up all these holes, ports for the intake, raise them so we don't drop nothing. These are your knock sensors there. Here's your two air lines coming in for bank 1 and 2. And that's the manifold assembly we've got to replace. We're going to do some checks on this and then remove and replace that manifold assembly. Put it all back together, make sure there's no water intrusion in this guy. And then in these lines and stuff, because that was a service bolt-in. But that usually comes down where the pumps go down there, water intrusion down there, because that's where they sit way down there. Highly doubt there's water up here. One of these valves is stuck closed, so we're going to do our checks. Again, now we got access, wire integrity, all that good stuff. And then clean it up, put it back together, torque it down the manifold, and redo our checks with the scan tool. So we'll go from here and do some more checks. All right, we got the new valves in, the switching valves in. So now what we're going to do is clean up the manifold, the heads. Clean up the heads, the manifold assembly, put the new gaskets on, put it all back together. All the wire integrity, all that stuff checked good. And if you look here, took these old ones apart. There's a lot of moisture condensation in here. Clean that out of there. Clean the lines up. See, these baffles are all nasty and moisture. So we go ahead and then put the new gaskets in, manifold in after we clean it all up and torque it down per service data. Put everything back together, vacuum lines, throttle body, all that, and then redo our checks. Alrighty, we got the manifold back on, everything hooked back up, torqued down, 15 foot-pounds, which are 180 inch-pounds for the manifold bolts. And then we do the throttle body bolts, which are 84 inch-pounds. We're hooking the battery back up. We're going to go ahead and clear all our codes, because we had key on, engine off, doing some tests. Clear all the codes, we'll run it with the diagnostic tool under special functions to make sure it passes its self-test. Alright, so I cleared all the codes. I just want to show you that there's no codes. And now what we're going to do is that special function, secondary air injection check. We're just going to do automatic mode, just like we did in the beginning of this video. Got key on, engine off. Automatic mode. Same stuff as the beginning of the video. It's going to count for 5 seconds. We're going to start the engine. Hit next. I'm going to let it count down. I'm going to pause it while it does its check after I hit next. So it'll take some time to do its check. Performing its check still. Air injection check. Checking all the pumps, the valves, the switching valves, all that good stuff. I'll pause it, let it finish it. And it's almost done. A couple seconds left. Okay, let's check if there's any DTCs before we did. We should not, because we fixed the problem. No trouble codes. Trouble codes are not detected. Read it again just to make sure. No, nothing. We could do the manual mode and everything, but there's no codes. So that is a fix for this 2010 Toyota Tundra with the 5.7. Had bad air injection valves. They were actually stuck closed with all of our data. This service bulletin wasn't really the issue with it. There was some moisture in there. Probably caused it to stick closed because condensation and rust and all that. Well, the condensation caused the rust. But we looked at everything else. Everything is good. Wire integrity is good. So that's a good fix for this vehicle. That is it for this video. I know I said I was done, but I'll give a little pointer out there. So you got your little valve assembly. It looks like a reed valve. Sits in here. Mirror image on this side. And you got your valve assembly there. That sits on this and it bolts down. And then your tubes go to your exhaust manifold off this way. Well, to remove this whole thing, you got a bolt here, and a bolt here. That's just for a bracket for a wire harness. But you have to remove these bolts. But when it's in the under the intake, you can't get these bolts out unless you remove the tubes off of the manifold, which is a very it's a pain in the butt to do. So, one of the first steps it tells you is remove the sub manifold assembly. So what you can do is you can remove the old one of these, the old one of these on both sides, bank 1 and 2, and just clean all this up, which we did. Replace this with the new one and the new one, because all this is just a hole in there, right? That's just a casting. That's all it is. So we cleaned all this up. This is what's not bad. What goes bad is this piece gets stuck in here electronically. You can see all the water, not water, but water that caused corrosion and stuff. And this valve assembly. So that's what we did on this one. Significantly sped up the process. Everything works good, what you've seen in the video. So just wanted to add that to the end of this video. That is it.